Hiya there, Pat Ryan, and I'm here to tell you another story. Now, before I begin, I should explain something. In Ireland, in many places, there are trees that grow, and they're called a fairy thorn tree, or the fairy tree, or a lonesome bush, and they belong to the fairy folk, so they say, the good people. Now, you mustn't touch a fairy thorn tree, it's bad luck. If a grown up touches a fairy thorn tree, the fairies give them a headache, or a tummy ache, or a toe ache. But if a child touches a fairy thorn tree, well, the fairies steal that child away, and the child is never seen again. And this is about two sisters who came across a fairy thorn tree. The story goes like this. A long time ago, there were two sisters, and their names were Annie and Rosie, and they were the best of children. Oh, these two sisters, they never fought and they never quarreled. They never teased each other or called each other names or yelled at each other or made fun of each other. Because, that's the way sisters and brothers are. Brothers and sisters never argue or fight or quarrel or tease each other or call each other names or make fun of each other, do they? Well, whenever these two girls went out, their mother or their father would say, Annie and Rosie, Rosie and Annie, have fun while you're out and about, but be careful. Watch out. If you see a fairy thorn tree, don't go near it. Don't touch it even by accident, for even if you touch the tree by mistake, the fairies will come and they'll steal you away and we'll never see you again. And that would break your mother's and father's hearts. Well, the two sisters promised they would never ever touch a fairy thorn tree, and they were good children who always did what their mother and father asked them to do, as I'm sure you do. But one day, Annie and Rosie were out playing, and it was coming towards the end of the day. The sun was heading down in the west. And Annie said, Come on, Rosie, it's time to go home. So they headed home. And to get there quick, they took a shortcut across a meadow. And as they crossed the meadow, they saw in the middle of it a fairy thorn tree. Come on, said Annie. We'll go the long way around. We won't go near that tree. If we touch it even by mistake, we'll be in trouble. I should tell you now that she was the big sister, and she was just a little wee bit bossy. Because that's the way it goes. Big sisters and big brothers are sometimes a bit bossy. So she grabbed Rosie by the hand, and they started going the long way around the side of the meadow. But as the two girls walked along, they suddenly heard music. The most beautiful music ever heard. Oh, I wish you could have heard it. It was gorgeous. The girls stopped to listen. Do you hear that? Asked Annie. I do, said Rosie. Where is it coming from? And Annie said, I believe the music's coming from the fairy thorn tree. Is it? Said Rosie. I'm going to go see who's making the music. Don't you dare, said Annie. You go to that tree. You'll touch it, and the fairies will steal you away. You'll cause all sorts of trouble, and I'll get blamed for it. That's the way it goes in families. Little ones cause all the trouble, and it's the big sisters and big brothers who get all the blame, right? But Rosie said, don't be silly. I'm not going to touch the tree. I'm just going to see who's making the music. And she ran away. Because that's the way it is in families. Little sisters and little brothers, they never do what the big sister or the big brother tells them to do. So Annie chased after Rosie to keep her out of trouble, and the girls got to the tree at the same time. And they pulled their skirts up close around their knees. Because, this was a long time ago when girls wore long dresses. And so they pulled their skirts and aprons close around their legs so they wouldn't touch the tree by mistake. And they looked around the tree. And what did they see? Fairy folk, the good people, the little people, hundreds of them. Now some were playing fiddles, and some were playing whistles, and some were playing flutes. Some were playing drums. Others were playing accordions and melodeons and concertinas, all kinds of squeeze boxes. And some were singing. They were making all kinds of wonderful music. Others were playing the harp. All kinds of music, all kinds of fun. But most of the fairy folk were dancing. They were having a party. Now, in Ireland, another word for a party where you're having music and singing and dancing, well, they call it a céilí, or sometimes they call it a hoolie. Next time you have a party, don't say, hey, come to my house, we're having a party. Say, hey, come to my place, we're having a bit of a hoolie. Sounds much more fun. And it is. Well, the fairies were having a hoolie, going right at it, having so much fun, a great time. And Rosie, she said, look, Annie, it's the fairy folk. They're having a céilí, they're having a hoolie. Now, she spoke a bit too loudly, because sometimes little sisters and little brothers have got very big mouths. And the fairies heard Rosie. They stopped dancing. The music stopped, the dancing stopped, and they ran up to the girls, looked them up, down, and all around, and they said, Annie and Rosie, Rosie and Annie, hey, come on, give us a dance. And Rosie said, oh, good, I love to dance. And Annie said, don't you dare. Don't you go dancing with the fairies. They'll trick you. They'll make you they'll make you touch the tree, and they'll steal you away. They'll lock you underground in a castle made of crystal and glass. We'll never see you again. And Rosie said, dry up. Don't be silly. I'm not going to touch the tree. I'm just going to have a bit of fun. I'm going to have a dance. And Rosie went and joined the fairies to dance, because like you know, I said, little ones, they never do what the big ones tell them to. But Annie was too shy, too scared. She stood in the shadows and covered her face with her hands, like this. But now and then she peeked out between her fingers, like this. And she could see her sister dancing with the fairies. Rosie was spinning and jumping and skipping and leaping, dancing about. They were having a great time. Well, the sun went down and the moon came up, and when it was night, the music stopped and the dancing stopped. And the king of the fairies came up to Rosie. Now he was the tallest of the bunch. And he said to Rosie, well, Rosie, you're a right good un. You're a good dancer. You're great fun. But it's very, very late. It's time the fairy folk were gone away. And it's time little children were gone away too. Hold out your hands. Well, Rosie held out her hands. And the king of the fairies said, you were good to us, we'll be good to you. We're going to give you a gift. And the fairy folk went around and they picked up all the dry, crumbly leaves on the ground. You know, the browny, yellowy, crumbled leaves. And they made a big pile of leaves in Rosie's hands. And the king of the fairies said, there now, put those in your pocket. Don't touch them. Don't look at them. Not until you're in your own house, under your own roof, with your mother and father, that look to see what there is to see. Well, Rosie shoved the leaves into her apron pocket, and she said thanks very much, and she bowed down to the fairy folk. Now, Annie had seen all this, and she was not too happy. She didn't think it was fair. Why did her little sister get a gift from the fairy folk, and she got nothing? That wasn't right. So Annie forgot she was shy. She forgot she was scared. She went up to the king of the fairies and said, oi, what about me? Don't I get a gift? Well, the fairy folk looked Annie up, down, all around. They didn't like the look of her. She hadn't been nice to them. She hadn't danced with them. She hadn't been kind to them or any fun at all. But fair is fair. If one person in the family gets a gift, the other people should get a gift too. I'm sure you've used that argument in your house. So the king of the fairies said, all right, we'll give you a gift. Put out your hands, Annie. Annie held out her hands. And again the fairies, they gathered up those brown, yellowy, crumbly leaves, you know, you see on the ground, and they piled the leaves up in Annie's hands. And the king of the fairies said, there now, put them in your pocket. Don't look at them, don't touch them, not until you're home. And when you get home, under your own roof, with your ma and your doll, look to see what there is to see. Well, Annie shoved the leaves in her pockets. And then, did she say thank you very much? No, she did not. Did she bow down to the fairies? No, she did not. She grabbed Rosie by the hand and said, hurry up, we're late, let's get out of here. Like I said, she could be just a wee bit bossy. Well, when they got home, it was so late. Their mother and father were so worried, so upset. They started shouting and yelling, girls, where have you been? We've been worried sick. We thought you were lost. We thought you were stolen. You've missed your supper. You know what mothers and fathers are like when you come home just a wee bit late? They go mad. Well, right away, Annie started telling on Rosie. Oh, some sisters and brothers are terrible tattletales. She said it's all Rosie's fault. She's a bold, naughty girl. Do you know what she did? She went and danced with the fairies. Well, Rosie was quite capable of telling her own story. She wasn't ashamed. She said, that's true. I did dance with the fairies, and I had a lovely time, and they gave me a gift. Look at what they gave to me. And she put her hand in her pocket. And you know what she pulled out? Not a handful of leaves. Not nothing. She pulled out a handful of golden coins. Fairy gold. It was so bright it lit the house up like it was the middle of the day instead of the middle of the night. Well, that family was surprised. They were gobsmacked. They'd never seen so much gold. But Annie didn't like it. She thought Rosie was showing off. And you know, big sisters and big brothers, they don't like it when little sisters and little brothers show off. Annie said, oh, that's nothing. I got a gift from the fairy folk too, and I'm sure my gift is much nicer than Rosie's. And she reached into her pocket. Do you know what she pulled out of her pocket? No, it wasn't gold. It wasn't silver. No, it wasn't dead leaves. It wasn't nothing. Ah, she wished it was nothing. It was really horrible. Are you sure you want to hear? Well, Annie reached into her pocket and she pulled a handful of horrible, smelly, slimy, stinky horse muck. Oh, cried Annie. Ooh, cried her mother and sister and father. And then Annie began to cry. Well, you would if that happened to you. But you know what her mother and father did? They began to laugh. They laughed. That's the way it goes. Sometimes children get very upset about something that's really serious and they're crying. And the mother and father still find something funny about it to laugh at. Have you noticed that? Well, her mother and father laughed and then they dried her tears and her mother said, oh, Annie, weren't you kind to the fairies? Weren't you nice to them? And Annie said, no, I was rude and bold and cheeky and I wouldn't dance and I didn't say thank you. Well, there you go, said her father. It's not just that you shouldn't touch the fairy thorn tree. When you meet the fairy folk, when you meet anyone, you should be good and kind. And if you're good to them, they'll be good to you. And they cleaned Annie up so she was all sweet smelling again and all tidy. And Rosie said she would share the fairy gold with her sister, fair and square, even Stephen. Because you know that's the way it goes. Brothers and sisters, they always share everything without fighting, don't they? Well, they should. Because Annie and Rosie shared the fairy gold, they never ran out of it. If they went to town together with one gold coin between them to buy something, when they bought something together with a gold coin, when they got back home, there were 2 new gold coins to take the place of the one they spent. Wouldn't that be lovely if all the money in the world worked that way, like fairy gold? So they have that gold still. If you don't believe this story is true, I'll tell you what to do. You come over here to Ireland. Come to Northern Ireland. Go to County Down to the town of Newcastle. You'll find it on a map. And when you get to Newcastle, take one of the roads that goes up into the Mourne Mountains, the mountains that sweep down to the sea. Now, if you get the right road, you'll come to a cottage in the mountains, a lovely thatched cottage where Annie and Rosie live. But they're not little girls now. This happened a long time ago. These are old ladies. They're nearly 100 years old. But if you're good to them, they'll be good to you if you pay them a call and you tell them a story or sing them a song or dance a dance or play a tune or ask a riddle. Well, if you're good to them, they'll be good to you. They'll give you a nice cup of tea and some homemade cakes and biscuits. And if you're really good, they'll show you the fairy gold so you can know the story is true. Why? They might give you a fairy coin, all of your own. And that is the story of the fairy thorn tree. I don't know if there's any that grow where you are. You have to look around for them. Nowadays, some people call them a hawthorn tree. But if you look around, you'll see there are still lots of fairy thorn trees in Ireland. Many stories about them. But that's all for now.